You vanished, not in the literal sense. No car crash, no breaking news, no long, dramatic message left behind. You simply stop replying. You stop posting. You stop showing up. The phone doesn't ring. The door doesn't open. You withdraw, quietly, completely, and without permission. At first, no one notices. The world spins as usual. Deadlines are met. Memes circulate. Group chats stay alive. But slowly something begins to shift. You become a ghost in people's memory, a missing variable in their carefully balanced expectations. Your silence is not just absence, it is provocation. Some people get anxious. They wonder if something happened. Maybe they offended you. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you're just busy. But beneath those assumptions, something deeper begins to fester. A discomfort with not knowing, with being denied access. Others take it personally. They see your withdrawal as rejection, an insult. How dare you not be available, not be present, not perform your role in their lives? You are no longer feeding their version of you, and without it, they begin to unravel. A few become obsessed. They watch your last seen status, revisit old messages, try to pull you back through guilt, concern, or manipulation. But none of it works. You're gone. And in that absence, a strange power emerges, something primal, something unsettling. Because in a world that thrives on constant connection, your silence is louder than a scream. People don't fear what you said, they fear what you didn't. The mystery of your retreat disturbs their illusion of control. It challenges the unspoken agreement we all signed, the one that says, be available, be visible, be compliant. But you didn't sign it. Or maybe you did and you've just now realized the cost. This isn't just a vanishing act. It's an awakening. Because when you stop being available, you begin to see the machinery behind attention, validation, and performance. You step outside the frame, and from that distance, the world looks different, less like a community, and more like a marketplace of attention. This isn't about becoming a recluse. It's about reclaiming your selfhood, about disrupting the rhythm others have come to depend on. It's about stepping off the stage and watching the audience panic in the silence. You become a mirror, and when people look for you and only find themselves, many don't like what they see. This is not a story about loneliness. It's a story about transformation, a story about someone who chose disappearance over distortion, silence over noise, depth over dopamine, and it begins with one terrifying, liberating decision: to no longer be available. You don't realize it at first. It begins with small things: the pressure to reply quickly, the expectation to be reachable, the subtle guilt of a missed call or a left-unread message. Then it builds. You're not just expected to be present, you're expected to perform. You post photos that don't reflect your mood. You laugh in comments you don't mean. You say, "I'm fine," when you're clearly not, because being fine is easier than explaining anything real. Availability is no longer a convenience. It's a requirement. We live in the cult of availability, and like most cults, it doesn't call itself one. It promises connection, belonging, and relevance. But what it really trades in is compliance. In the past, availability was physical. You were present if you were in the room. Now, presence is digital, 24/7, and relentless. Your green light is on. Your status is updated. Your story is still active. You are expected to broadcast your life even if you don't understand it yourself. But where did this start? Not with smartphones, not even with the internet. It began with a shift deeper than technology, a shift in how we see ourselves. Marshall McLuhan once said that media are extensions of ourselves. The wheel extended our feet, the phone extended our voice. But social media, it extended our persona. We don't just use these tools, we become them. The self becomes split. There's the person who eats the meal, and there's the person who documents it. There's the one who lives, and the one who narrates. The digital persona takes over. It becomes the mask we show to the world. Polished, responsive, available. But there's a cost. The more we serve the persona, the more we neglect the self. Carl Jung warned of this very dynamic. The persona, he wrote, is a necessary social mask, but when we identify too strongly with it, we begin to forget who we are beneath it. The persona thrives on attention. The self thrives on solitude. But solitude is now treated like a sickness. If you're not online, people assume you're angry, sad, or weird. If you don't respond immediately, you're seen as rude, arrogant, or worse, irrelevant. We've become afraid of being unavailable, because being unavailable means we risk being forgotten. And in a culture where visibility equals value, invisibility feels like death. This isn't paranoia. It's designed that the architecture of our digital world rewards engagement and punishes retreat. Algorithms favor the active. Notifications bait our attention like slot machines. Every platform whispers the same thing: don't disappear, don't stop, don't look away. We are trapped in a panopticon of visibility. Philosopher Michel Foucault described the panopticon as a prison in which every inmate could be watched at any time. The power wasn't in being watched, it was in the possibility of being watched. That constant surveillance made people police themselves. That's exactly what social media has become. We no longer need external authority to control us. We control ourselves. We curate ourselves. We brand ourselves that we become performers in a theater of attention. And the audience, it's everyone. Friends, strangers, colleagues, exes, employers, algorithms, governments. And yet, we consent to it. Not because we love it, but because we fear the alternative. To disappear is to lose perceived value. In relationships, availability becomes a test of loyalty. In careers, it's a sign of ambition. The more available you are, the more committed you appear, even if you're crumbling inside. This constant exposure is a psychological weight. It fragments the self. It breeds anxiety because you're always on. It fuels depression because no matter how much attention you get, it's never enough to replace genuine connection. And connection, that requires stillness, presence, vulnerability, qualities that cannot survive in the shallow waters of digital performance. So what happens when a person starts to feel hollow, even as their life looks full? What happens when your notifications light up, but your soul goes dark? That's the price of availability. We were never meant to be accessible to hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people all at once. Our nervous systems weren't designed for it. Our identities weren't meant to be crowdsourced. Jung believed that healing requires turning inward. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be. But individuation requires stepping away, detaching, saying no. And in a culture obsessed with yes, that's considered deviant. The cult of availability thrives on your fear of being forgotten. But maybe being forgotten by the world is exactly what you need to remember who you are. Because availability might gain you followers, but unavailability, that might give you back your soul. When Carl Jung spoke of the human psyche, he painted a picture that was both complex and unsettling. The self, he believed, is not a static, easily defined thing. It is a dynamic, evolving force within us, a synthesis of light and shadow, consciousness and unconsciousness. And yet, in the modern world, we risk losing touch with this true self, not because it disappears, but because we actively push it aside. Jung understood that society demands conformity. We're taught early on how to behave, how to respond, how to act in ways that please others. We craft a persona, a social mask, to meet those demands. The persona is our outward identity. It's what we show the world. The problem, Jung argued, arises when we begin to over-identify with this mask, when it becomes not just what we wear for the world, but who we believe ourselves to be. This is where the danger lies. The more we identify with our persona, the more we lose contact with the part of us that lies beneath, the shadow, the hidden, darker aspects of our psyche is cast into the background. The shadow is where all the parts of ourselves we've repressed go. The traits we deem unacceptable or unworthy. It's the wild, instinctive part of us that society tells us to suppress in favor of civility and order. But the shadow doesn't go away. It festers. It grows in the darkness, waiting to be acknowledged. When we ignore it too long, it begins to take shape in destructive ways. Jung believed that the repression of the shadow doesn't just lead to inner conflict, it creates a split in the personality. The persona becomes a prison, one where we're trapped in a role that no longer fits who we are or who we could become. The more available we are to others, the more we lose access to our true selves. In the digital age, Availability has become the ultimate currency. If you don't reply immediately, if you don't post regularly, if you don't engage, you're left behind. Your social value declines. Your worth is no longer measured by your actions or ideas, but by how often you make yourself accessible to others. It's a constant performance, a show you put on, always eager to please, to be noticed, to be accepted. But what happens when you're constantly performing? You lose the space to reflect, to feel, to truly exist in silence. You become nothing more than a reflection of others' expectations. Jung called this process the loss of the authentic self. The more we give ourselves away in an effort to please and conform, the more we lose touch with what we truly are. The act of being perpetually available is, at its core, a denial of our own interiority. We disconnect from the deeper part of us, the part that is silent, mysterious, and untamed. And in that disconnection, we begin to lose ourselves. Jung didn't just warn of the dangers of over-identifying with the persona. He called for a process of individuation. Individuation is the journey back to the self, a journey of integrating all parts of the psyche, including the shadow, to become whole. It's a painful process, one that demands us to confront the parts of ourselves we've been taught to ignore. But it's also the only path to authenticity. When we choose to be constantly available, we not only sacrifice our own peace, we surrender our ability to grow, to change, and to become the person we are meant to be. We cling to the version of ourselves that is acceptable to others, but we lose the deeper, more complex truth that lies beneath. Jung's words echo in this moment. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This isn't a simple task. It's not about fitting in. It's about shedding the layers of expectation, projection, and superficiality that have been heaped upon us. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that have been buried, the parts that live in silence and mystery, the parts that are unavailable to the world because they are, by their very nature, not meant to be consumed or commodified. In a world that demands constant availability, this journey toward the true self is radical. It's a rebellion against the forces that would have us play the role of the perfect friend, employee, partner, or influencer. It's an act of courage to step away from the spotlight and into the shadows, to say no to the world in order to say yes to your own soul. As we peel away the layers of our persona, we begin to find something far more powerful, the untamed, unfiltered force of our true selves, and that, Jung suggests, is the greatest privilege of all. But to experience it, we must first step away from the constant demand for availability and face the uncomfortable silence that lies beneath. Only then can we truly hear the voice of the self, waiting to be found. Withdrawing isn't passive. It's not simply a retreat into solitude. It's an act of defiance. In a world that demands constant connection, choosing to step back, to become unavailable, is a radical choice, a choice that sends ripples through the lives of those around you. You see, we don't live in a vacuum. The constant availability we offer is not just for our convenience, it's a form of service to others. It's an unspoken contract. We give them our time, our attention, our validation, and in return, we expect acceptance, approval, and often a piece of our identity. To step away from this feedback loop is to sever that connection, and the results can be jarring, not just for you, but for everyone else involved. Take a moment to think about the people in your life, the ones who demand your presence, your responses, your approval. What happens when you stop giving it? When you become unavailable? It's more than just silence. It's a confrontation. You're forcing them to look at something they'd rather not see: their dependency on you, their addiction to your attention, their inability to exist without the constant reassurance of your availability. This is where the real psychological rebellion begins. When you stop being available, you disrupt their world. You trigger their discomfort, not just with your absence, but with the silence you leave behind. Silence, in a world obsessed with noise, is a revolutionary act. It's a refusal to play the game, a rejection of the constant exchange of energy that fuels the machinery of modern social life. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of expectation, the absence of performance, the absence of being measured by someone else's standards. In the digital age, silence becomes an act of power. It's the power of stepping outside the social web that has ensnared us, when you stop responding to messages, when you stop posting for likes or retweets, you stop participating in the validation game. You step out of the cycle of feedback loops, where your worth is measured by how often you show up, how quickly you respond, and how much of your life you are willing to share. This act of stepping away is not just about reclaiming time, it's about reclaiming selfhood. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, takes root here. Individuation is the journey of integrating all parts of the self, the conscious, the unconscious, the light, and the shadow. It's a process that demands we turn inward, confront the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding, and resist the pressures of society that want us to conform. When you stop being available, you create space for individuation. You give yourself the freedom to explore who you are without the constant noise and distraction of others' expectations. And yet, this withdrawal isn't easy. It's unsettling. It's a confrontation not just with others, but with ourselves. Because when we pull back, we must face the emptiness of our own minds. The silence can be overwhelming. Without the external validation, we are forced to sit with our own thoughts, our own discomforts, and our own fears. But it is here, in the silence, that we begin to hear something deeper, the voice of the authentic self. The psychological shift is not just personal, it's a philosophical one as well. Nietzsche's Will to Power offers a profound lens through which to view this act of withdrawal. Nietzsche believed that life was a struggle for power, not in the sense of domination over others, but the power to affirm oneself, to shape one's own destiny. The will to power is the drive to express and manifest one's true essence, and it often requires stepping outside of the herd mentality, outside of social norms, and asserting one's individuality. When you choose silence, you are asserting your will to power. You're saying that you will no longer be defined by the external forces that demand your attention and approval. You will define yourself on your own terms, in your own time. This is a fundamental shift in power dynamics. By stepping away from the endless cycle of social interaction, you reclaim the power to choose what, when, and how you engage with the world. You are no longer a passive participant. You are an active creator of your own reality. There's also an element of Stoic detachment here, a concept that shares philosophical roots with both Nietzsche and Jung. The Stoics taught that true freedom comes from detaching oneself from the external world, its praise, its criticism, its demands. When you step away from constant availability, you align yourself with this ancient wisdom. You become less dependent on external validation, less shaken by the opinions of others, and more grounded in your own inner stillness. In choosing silence, you choose to relinquish the grip that society has on your identity. You stop performing, you stop reacting, and in doing so, you reclaim something far more powerful: autonomy. This is the true meaning behind the title. When you stop being available, everything changes. The moment you step outside the feedback loops, whether they're personal or digital, everything shifts. You stop being defined by others' perceptions of you, and you begin to define yourself. You stop living on the terms of society, and you start living on your own. What was once a small, unnoticeable act of resistance becomes a profound psychological shift. The world doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. The noise isn't any quieter, but you've learned how to sit in the silence, and in that silence, you discover something extraordinary. You discover the power of your own presence, the depth of your own soul, and the freedom that comes when you choose to be unavailable. The moment you decide to stop playing your role, society reacts. It may not always be immediate, but the ripple effect is inevitable. When you choose to withdraw, to become unavailable, the world doesn't simply shrug its shoulders. It retaliates. At first, it's subtle. You might notice a shift in tone when people speak to you, a new undercurrent in conversations. Then the labels start: selfish, distant, cold, arrogant. The more you step back, the more these words are thrown at you. What once seemed like harmless interactions now feel like accusations. This is where the psychology of projection comes into play. Projection is a defense mechanism, a way people cope with their own uncomfortable feelings by attributing them to others. When you stop responding in the way society expects, when you withdraw from the constant cycle of engagement, People project their own insecurities onto you. They can't accept your withdrawal because, on some level, it forces them to confront their own fears. It forces them to look at the quiet spaces they've been avoiding, the parts of themselves they've hidden away. Jung described this phenomenon when he spoke about the persona, the mask we wear in public. The persona isn't inherently negative. It's a social necessity. But when people over-identify with their persona, they become fragile. Their identity relies on the roles they play. When you stop playing yours, it shatters the idealized image they've constructed of you. It exposes the uncomfortable truth that, perhaps, they've been more attached to the mask than the person beneath it. What happens next is predictable. People feel betrayed. They react with confusion and anger. In their eyes, you've broken an unwritten rule. You were supposed to be predictable, constant, and always available. To not fulfill this expectation is perceived as an act of disloyalty. They project their discontent onto you, labeling you selfish, mentally unstable, or emotionally distant. But what they're truly reacting to is their own fear of solitude and introspection. This brings us to a cultural phenomenon that is deeply ingrained in modern society: the fear of solitude. We are taught from an early age that loneliness is a curse to be avoided at all costs. We're conditioned to fear being alone, to fear the silence, and to view introspection as indulgent or even dangerous. In our society, it's not just frowned upon to withdraw, it's seen as a moral failure. To step away from the noise is to risk being ostracized, misunderstood, or even labeled as mentally ill. But why this deep-rooted fear of solitude? The answer lies in how society has come to value the persona over the self. The persona is manageable. It's predictable. It fits into the tidy, ordered narrative of modern life. The raw, unfiltered self, it's messy, it's chaotic, it's uncomfortable. In a culture that thrives on constant visibility, on performance and productivity, the unavailability of an individual is an anomaly. It's a disruption to the flow of consumption and validation, and that disruption is uncomfortable. This discomfort is why society prefers the obedient persona. The persona is easy to digest. It's a role that can be understood, marketed, and used. The raw self, however, is uncontrollable. It doesn't fit the mold. It's unpredictable. And in a world where everything is commodified, where identity itself is often sold, the unavailability of someone who refuses to be a commodity is perceived as a threat not only to the person who withdraws, but to the very system that depends on their constant availability. Jung believed that society's demand for conformity was one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth. People don't want to see the unfiltered self because it forces them to confront their own fragmentation. It's easier to project blame, to label someone as difficult or flawed, than it is to question the underlying system that created the pressure in the first place. And so, those who refuse to conform to these norms, those who withdraw or become unavailable, become targets. They are seen as disruptors, not because they are inherently dangerous, but because they refuse to participate in the game. This leads us to a disturbing but increasingly common feature of modern culture: guilt culture. In today's world, emotional manipulation is often wielded as a weapon. People who choose to step away, to be unavailable, are quickly accused of being selfish or uncaring. Their absence is interpreted not as a form of self-care or individuation, but as a betrayal of social bonds. The unavailability is treated as a personal affront. This is especially prevalent in the context of relationships, both personal and professional. The emotional labels that are applied to those who withdraw are not just insults. They are tools of control. In a society where emotional conformity is expected, labels like cold or mentally unstable function as moral judgments. They are meant to shame the individual back into compliance. If you become unavailable, you risk being ostracized, labeled as someone who doesn't care, or worse, as someone who is psychologically unfit to engage with the world. But this is where the misunderstanding occurs. The act of withdrawing, of being unavailable, is not an act of betrayal. It's often an act of transformation. It's a call for personal growth, for stepping away from the chaos and noise to discover who you truly are beneath the surface. And yet, the world doesn't see it this way. It's too wrapped up in the need for constant availability, constant connection, and constant validation. The social pressure to remain available is not just about the relationships you hold, it's about control. It's about making sure that everyone is playing the same game, responding on cue, fitting into the same mold. When someone refuses to play, they become a threat to that order. They become a mirror, reflecting the truth that no one really wants to face. That society's obsession with availability is a mechanism of control, and that the cost of compliance is your very soul. When you stop being available, everything changes, not just for you, but for everyone who is used to expecting you. And in the face of that change, people will react with guilt, with projection, and with manipulation. But it's not your job to save them from their discomfort. Your withdrawal is your own act of rebellion, your own act of individuation. It is a refusal to be controlled, a reclaiming of your power. And in that moment of silence, you become something far more powerful, authentic, untouchable, and free. After the withdrawal, the return comes, but it's never the same. You are no longer the same person who once responded to every message, attended every meeting, or was available at the whim of others. Once you've tasted psychological freedom, there's no going back to the version of yourself that existed. In the constant cycle of expectation and obligation, this return, this comeback, follows the arc of the hero's journey, a classic narrative of descent, confrontation, and rebirth. The withdrawal is your descent into the underworld, where you confront the deeper, darker aspects of yourself. It is in this solitude that you meet the shadow, those aspects of your psyche that have been repressed, ignored, or hidden behind the mask of the persona. And it is in this confrontation, in the silence, that you experience transformation. The journey inward is never easy. It requires courage to face the truths you've avoided, to sit with the discomfort of your own thoughts, and to embrace the parts of yourself you've long neglected. But in doing so, you begin the process of integration, the merging of the light and shadow, the conscious and unconscious, the persona and the authentic self. Then comes the return. But unlike the hero who re-enters the world with loud proclamations or dramatic actions, your return is subtle, it's grounded. It's not about showing the world how much you've changed. It's about simply being different. The way you move through the world now is quieter, more deliberate. You speak less, but when you do, your words carry weight. There's a presence about you that unsettles people, not because you're aggressive or disruptive, but because you've become whole. Your energy no longer bends to the whims of others. You choose when to engage, when to speak, and when to withdraw. You are not beholden to the expectations of others. This is the Jungian self, fully realized, someone who has reconciled the inner conflicts of the psyche and embraced both light and shadow. The self is not a static entity, but a dynamic process of integration. It is the realization that you are not just the mask you wear, not just the roles you play, but something deeper, something whole. Your return isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't need to be. You've learned the power of presence over performance. You are no longer a product to be consumed, a commodity to be used. Your presence is a conscious choice. You choose when to engage and when to withdraw. You choose to offer parts of yourself, but not all. And in this newfound autonomy, you become someone who exists on their own terms. People may notice the change. They may comment on how you seem different, more grounded, more focused. They may even feel discomforted by your quiet confidence, but they will no longer be able to manipulate you into a role you no longer fit. The return is the moment of rebirth, not a return to who you were before, but a return as someone who has been transformed. You have undergone the psychological death and rebirth that Jung described, and now you carry the wisdom of the journey within you. This return represents the final stage of individuation, where you embrace the entirety of yourself, the persona, the shadow, and the authentic self. It's the moment when you no longer need external validation to know who you are. You know yourself, you've integrated your light and darkness, and you exist in the world not as a reflection of others' expectations, but as your true, whole self. And the beauty of this transformation is that it doesn't need to be announced. It speaks through your actions, through your presence, through the subtle shifts in how you engage with the world. You no longer need to prove yourself because you know, deep down, that you've already become who you truly are. You've reclaimed your power, your identity, and your autonomy. And that makes all the difference. We began with disappearance, a quiet vanishing that left questions in the air, a person slipping into the shadows, leaving only echoes in their wake. At the time, it was a mystery, something unsettling, something that raised the hairs on the back of our necks. But now, after the journey we've taken together, we realize that disappearance is not just an absence. It's not an escape. It's a medicine. In a world that is growing louder by the minute, where every moment is filled with noise, be it the ping of a notification, the hum of endless opinions, or the ceaseless pressure to perform, stepping back becomes the ultimate act of mental health. It is no longer a retreat. It's a radical reassertion of self. To withdraw from the noise isn't to retreat into weakness, it is to claim space for your mind, for your soul, and for your body. It is a powerful statement of self-preservation in a world that demands too much, too quickly, too often. In this age of hyper-availability, we often forget the simple truth. Not everyone deserves your presence. It's an uncomfortable idea to entertain, yet profoundly liberating. The more available you are, the more people come to expect your energy, your time, your attention, as though it were a given. But your presence, your energy is sacred. And when you become too easy to reach, when you are constantly at the beck and call of others, you devalue yourself. You become a mere commodity, a resource to be used and consumed. The active disappearance of reclaiming your autonomy and your inner silence turns your energy into something rare. It makes you a choice, not a guarantee. This is the essence of power, to be present when you choose to be, and to be absent when you need to be. By being hard to reach, you reclaim control over your own life, over your own time, and most importantly, over your own mind. You cease to be a puppet of external demands, and instead, you become the master of your own destiny. Jung, McLuhan, and Nietzsche each spoke to this in their own way. Jung warned against the dangers of over-identifying with the persona, the mask we wear for others. When we constantly seek to please or to be available, we lose sight of who we truly are. Our inner world shrinks, and the self becomes fragmented. To withdraw is to seek wholeness, to seek the integration of our light and shadow. It is an act of individuation, becoming who we truly are beneath the surface. Marshall McLuhan, with his brilliant insights into media and technology, highlighted the ways in which our constant visibility has made us extensions of the systems we interact with. We are no longer just people. We are products, brands, and avatars. Availability has become a currency, and we've become slaves to the constant demand for our presence. But McLuhan also saw that technology, while a powerful tool, could be harnessed for a different kind of power, one where silence, withdrawal, and introspection can become a radical act of resistance. And Nietzsche, perhaps the boldest of them, all championed the idea of the will to power, the strength to forge your own path, independent of societal expectations. To choose solitude, to step away from the noise, is not weakness. It is the path of the individual who refuses to be defined by the whims of others. It is an act of creation, of becoming. As we draw this journey to a close, we're left with one powerful question. Maybe the question isn't who you're trying to be available for, but who you become when you're finally just available to yourself. The act of disappearance is not about cutting yourself off from the world. It's about returning to yourself. It's about finding peace in your own presence, in your own silence, and in the space where the noise of the world can no longer reach. Only then can you become who you are truly meant to be, not a reaction to the world, but a force unto yourself. And so, we leave you with this thought. In an age that demands everything of us, maybe the most radical act we can perform is to simply step away, not out of fear, but out of power, not to escape, but to emerge whole. Because when you stop being available, everything changes.